Hi friends, welcome out to another episode of Build a Better Bike. In today's video, I want to show you how you can take a base model hardtail mountain bike and turn it into a bike your kid can take to the races. Whether your kid is going to be doing some NICA events or the local mountain bike cross-country scene, it's going to make a massive difference to have the right bike. As a coach on both a NICA team and a club team, I have seen this time and time again. Parents buying a base model hardtail from the bike shop or department store and realizing really quickly that these bikes are not equipped sufficiently to handle the kind of riding the student athlete is going to participate in. Keep in mind, a lot of these entry-level mountain bikes are fine. The frame especially is usually really good quality. Bike makers have had years to improve the geometry and construction, but these bikes come equipped with components that are designed to get kids to school and back or to their friends. On NICA, your kid will be riding maybe 10 to 15 miles 3 times a week for months out of the year on actual mountains. That's a lot of abuse on any bike, and I can tell you right now that most entry-level mountain bikes were not built for that. As a mechanic, as a coach, I see it all the time. And trust me, nothing takes the fun out of mountain biking faster than a bike with constant mechanical issues. And if it's hard to shift or clunking around on the trail, if it weighs a ton, and if it doesn't look very cool, then don't be surprised when they say they'd rather stay at home and play Fortnite. On the other hand, having a kid who loves to mountain bike is about the best gift a biking dad could ask for. If your kid can forget about the bike under them and just focus on the riding, the likelihood of them wanting to ride more in the future will be exponential. Additionally, any weight you can save on their bike will reward them come race day. If you're willing to invest in their bike, both of you are going to have a lot more fun, and you'll be giving your kid more than just a gift of a nice bike. You'll be helping her develop confidence, grit, and promoting a healthy mind and body for maybe the rest of her life. But don't forget, an upgraded bike is also a gift to you. A bike with better components means less maintenance for you. If the tires aren't always flat, if the shifting and braking isn't always borked, if the bike just works, then you don't have to take time out of your day to constantly work on things or take it to the shop. So today, I'm going to take an actual bike, which is exactly the type of bike I'm talking about, and we're going to use it as an example and upgrade the heck out of it. In this case, we have the Trek Harley S, with a setup nearly identical to hundreds of models of starter mountain bikes we've seen over the years. These are bikes like the Trek Marlin, the Specialized Rockhopper, the Marin San Quentin, the Giant Talon, Scott Aspect, Diamondback Line or Hatch, GT Aggressor, Polygon Cascade, several co-ops and Konas, and even some department store bikes like the Walmart Ozark Trail. There are thousands upon thousands of these on the new and used markets, and most of them can be purchased for under $800, especially if they're purchased used, like this one was for my customer. And our goal here for this customer will be to make this bike racing and training worthy for less than it would have cost to buy this bike new. This isn't an easy task, but I think we can do it. And while we're on the subject of money, I want to give you a special offer for all you parents of kids who want to get into biking. You can get 20% off buying all the parts and the tools that I'll be showing you today that you'll need to perform these upgrades yourself when you buy directly from me. So if you want to save some money and upgrade that hardtail to better equip your kid to find success on the trail, click on the link in the description below or follow the link on the screen to fill out a form that will get you these upgrades going at a huge discount off retail. And then follow along and make these upgrades on your kid's bike with me. So let's get to it. For 90% of the work that we do on bikes, you need a basic Allen or hex key set. And for most of those, the Park Tool 3-way hex wrench is great, but really any hex set will probably work fine. I assume you have access to this. But if you need one, you can find a set of Allen keys in my Build a Better Bike Basics toolkit. You also find an option for some cable cutters, which is extremely important. Normal wire cutters will not cut it for clipping bike cable housing as well as shifting cable. And if you've ever tried, you'll know that it doesn't work. Removing old slide-on style grips is a huge pain unless you use an air compressor or simply razor blade remove them like I do. I get some criticism for this approach as it can mar the handlebar, but honestly, who really cares? We're going to be replacing these handlebars anyway. It seemed the owner had already moved the cabling to this front derailleur, thinking ahead to the one-bike conversion that this bike was destined to receive. Sr Suntour XCM forks are extremely common on entry-level bikes, And I'm willing to bet it's the same thing that you've got on your kid's bike right now. These things are tanks, and they work fine for getting adolescents back and forth from school or to friends' houses. No need for anything fancy for that, but this coil fork is not going to cut it for a kid hoping to shred the local mountains and earn spots on podiums. It's clunky, it's not smooth, and above all, it's extremely heavy. So let's pull off the front tire and set that aside. We'll also remove the front brake caliper. We'll then pull the headset cap off. We'll remove the stem, and at this point we'll hold the fork up as there's nothing keeping it from falling out the bottom of the head tube. We'll remove the headset spacers and set those aside. We'll use those later, and then remove the upper portion of the headset. You'll have a dust seal, a compression ring, and then the top bearing. Once we pull the fork out of the head tube, we'll also have the bottom bearing and crown race visible. Take note of the condition of the headset. This is the time you'll want to decide whether you'll be replacing it or not. In this case, where the headset bearings are loose ball bearings in a retainer cage, not sealed cartridge bearings, we'll absolutely need to replace it. Loose ball bearings are prone to damage from elements and will not last as long as sealed cartridge bearings will. With the fork removed, we'll take this opportunity to degrease and clean the head tube. Then we'll realize we didn't really need to clean it anyway, as the new headset comes with new headset cups. To remove the existing cups, we can use this special tool called a headset cut remover, but this isn't absolutely necessary. You can pound those cups out with all sorts of different tools of persuasion. Now your bike might be different, but most of the time the head tube will be a straight tube. However, we're going to be upgrading this fork to something lighter and more performant, and that usually means that we need a tapered head tube. To make that work, we're going to be killing two birds with one stone. New sealed cartridge bearing headset, but also one which will convert our straight tube fork friend to one which will support a tapered fork. I use this headset all the time for upgrading hardtails like this. Before we install the new headset cups, we'll apply some grease. When I build bikes, I typically use 3 or 4 different types of grease, but that's not strictly necessary. You can get away with using some simple generic marine grease, or what I have here, Park Tool Polylube, which is sort of an all-purpose grease that will work as assembly grease as well as all moving parts. Grease is included as an option in the Build a Better Bike Basics toolkit. If you're going to be installing new headset cups with your build, a bearing cup press is a very important tool, as it helps evenly insert these cups without causing them to go unduly cockeyed, which would cause some issues. I've tried to install headset cups before with hammers or other things, and it just hasn't gone as well. With the headset bearing cups installed, we can now dry fit the new headset along with the new fork. On this build, I'll be installing a RockShox Judy Gold RL-A3, which is a lightweight, smooth, serviceable, adjustable air fork, which is going to be all our shredder will need during his first few years of serious mountain biking. This fork is currently on sale at a huge discount, and you can get it as an option in your Build a Better Bike hardtail upgrade kit. We first need to install the fork's crown race. Sometimes these are notched or sized in a way that they slide onto a fork with relative ease. Other times, like this time, the crown race needs some persuasion. You can use a tool like this crown race setter to slam it home, or simply the right size pipe from Home Depot could also do the trick. With the crown race installed, we can then slide on the bottom bearing, make sure that the angled side is facing up. Then we'll slide the fork up through the head tube. We'll slide the smaller top bearing down, this time with the angled side facing down. Then we'll slide the compression ring down. This usually is a different color than the rest of the headset, and it has a little notch in it. Next, we'll seal that all up with the dust seal. Finally, we'll add a couple of headset spacers and then the stem. This will give us our cutting height for the fork steer tube, and we'll mark that with an awl or something sharp so we'll know where to cut later on. Then we'll take it all back apart again so we can do some cutting. When cutting the steer tube, you'll want to move down at least 2 millimeters from where you marked. If you cut directly where you marked, this will cause problems later on. This is a noob mistake, and it's not uncommon. Make sure you move down a couple millimeters. To cut the tube, you can use a vise or a hacksaw. Just make sure to cut as straight as possible. Most bike shops will use a cutting guide. You can place that into a vise, but my preference is just a typical pipe cutter, which really works fine. This is not included in the Build a Better Bike Basics toolkit, but I'll have an Amazon link to one below. When I tighten the tension on the pipe cutter, I do so very lightly. I've learned that if you tighten too much too fast, you will ruin the sharp edge and you'll need to replace the tool prematurely. Once you've cut the tube, you can file it down if you want, though this isn't strictly necessary. Next, we need to install the star nut, or as the Brits would call it, the star-fangled nut. Love that term. To install this, it's better to use a special tool. It's possible to install with just a hammer and the bolt that screws into the star nut, but I don't recommend it. I've seen enough cockeyed star nuts inside of fork tubes to know it usually doesn't go well. But the star nut installation tool in my kit is not terribly expensive and will ensure the nut goes in nice and straight. Be careful not to overhammer, as it can be difficult to unscrew the setter if you've gone too hard on it. Now we'll do the final fitting for the headset, and this time we'll apply liberal amounts of grease during the process. After sliding on the stem, you'll want to verify that you at least have 2 millimeters below the stem where the steer tube starts. This is very important. The spacers or stem on the top should not be flush with the steer tube, or longer. Your racer is going to have a really bad time if it does. So at least 2 millimeters of space is important. Next, you'll want to throw away that old boring top cap and replace it with a brand new Build a Better Bike top cap that I'll send you free with your upgrade kit. This might be the most important upgrade and will definitely make your young racer go faster. Tighten up the top cap until you no longer feel any play between the fork and headset, but not so tight as it becomes stiff to rotate the fork in the head tube. Once that's snugged where it should be, then you can tighten the stem clamps. Usually we tighten these to 5 Newton meters, but if you don't have a torque wrench, then, just use your instincts, because what could go wrong? Instead of reusing that heavy aluminum handlebar we removed earlier, I'll be providing my customer with an extremely lightweight and very affordable carbon straight handlebar, which are optionally available in my upgrade kit. Since this is an aluminum stem on a carbon handlebar, we will be checking torque, as you do run some risk with over-tightening when you have metal on carbon components. It's very common when installing brake levers for folks to not angle the levers down enough. This creates undue pressure on your little racer's wrists. Don't make that mistake. In general, levers should point at a steep angle downward, and then you should adjust when your kid is on the bike. Now technically, the old front wheel will work on our new front fork, as it's the same hub width as our old fork. It's a quick release axle, but you'll notice that this bike has a rim brake style rim for some weird reason. And this would be fine if we wanted to keep using tubes, but for our NICA racer, they're going to be much happier, and as a parent, you'll be much happier if your kids are running tubeless. The reasons why are beyond the scope of this video, so if you're confused by this, we recommend further research. So we'll go ahead and remove the rotor from this hub using our Part Tool 3-way Torx wrench available in the Build a Better Bike Basics toolkit. We'll be careful not to touch the face of the rotor where the brake pad makes contact, as the oils from our skin can degrade the effectiveness of the braking. Since we're on the subject of wheels, did you know that nearly 20% of the weight of your bike is in the wheel set? So we can save a lot of weight by upgrading this front wheel. To do that, I'm going to build a new wheel set myself with one of my favorite rims. This is the WTB KOM Light, and this is one of the lightest aluminum rims out there, but it's also really affordable. so you'll get the same weight you would from a high-end, seriously expensive carbon rim at a fraction of the price. I'm also going to use some lightweight spokes, and I'm going to build this with an affordable Shimano front hub, but for you, if you need to upgrade your front or back wheels, the whole wheel set can be included in your kit. I'll build that for you. However, to go tubeless, you will need to do a bit of work on the wheel set. I like to heat up the rim before I apply tubeless tape, as it makes the tape be a bit more pliable as it adheres to the rim and creates a better seal. We will not be using the Bontrager tire for the front, as we decided that that would work better in the rear as we lose that heavy Maxxis back tire. Instead, we'll install the affordable but still lightweight and excellent performing XC race tire, the Schwalbe Rocket Ron. And then we'll remember we were supposed to install the tubeless valve first and go ahead and do that prior to fully installing the tire. When it comes to tire levers, I love Pedro's tire levers. They're thick and beastly, and they don't break like the cheap little plastically flimsy tire levers you get in kits or you get off Amazon. Make sure to get some Pedro's or something akin. I'll add around 4 ounces of stand sealant. You can do this without removing a valve core and using a syringe by just pouring 4 ounces of sealant directly into the tire prior to fully installing it onto the rim. But this tends to create less mess. Well, at least that's the idea. We'll then pop that rotor onto the wheel set and install the wheel set onto the fork, and then reinstall the front brake caliper. We'll now turn our attention to the drivetrain of this bike and converting it from the 3x9 that it sort of is right now into a 1x11 drivetrain. The 1x drivetrains create a lot of benefits for our young riders. The most obvious is that it's much more simple and straightforward for a young rider to use. Why they even create mountain bikes nowadays with 2 or even 3x drivetrains blows my mind. In my opinion as a parent, the 1x drivetrain was the single best improvement ever made to the modern mountain bike. But in addition to just making things easier on our young riders, this is also going to make things much easier for future maintenance, and it's also going to make things a lot lighter. To remove this crankset, we'll need another specialty tool. This crankset uses what is known as a square taper bottom bracket, which is definitely something we will want to upgrade from, but we will need a tool called a crank puller. And if your upgrade includes moving away from a square type style crankset and bottom bracket, you'll definitely want this included in your Build a Better Bike basic toolkit. We'll first thread on the tool, ensuring a snug fit and no cross-threading, which is easy to do, but will make for a very bad day. After ensuring that it's threaded correctly and fully, we'll then tighten the inner tip insert, which will lever the crank off the square tapered bottom bracket. This is very satisfying to remove, particularly when you feel how heavy these cranks are. It's nice to see that weight being shed from this bike. We'll now want to remove that bottom bracket. Square taper bottom brackets are an older biking technology, and it's still relevant and useful for regular get around town type bikes. But when it comes to racing bikes, it's a lot of weight and it's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. To remove this bottom bracket, we're going to need yet another, but fortunately inexpensive specialty tool, the 20-tooth cartridge bearing removal tool. We remove the bottom bracket bearing from the right and the left side of the bike. When we remove the right side, or the drive side of the bike, it's important to remember that this is reverse threaded, so we'll be going righty-loosey instead of lefty-loosey for this side. We'll take this chance to degrease and clean out the bottom bracket shell and then apply a fresh coat of polylube. Our new bottom bracket will be much lighter and much more reliable. It's the SRAM Dub bottom bracket. We tighten this bottom bracket on with yet another specialty tool, This will be our 12-notch 46mm bottom bracket installation / remover tool. We'll now install a much lighter, simpler, and ever-reliable SRAM NX crankset with the narrow-wide 32 front chainring, which is necessary for retaining either an 11-speed or a 12-speed chain. We'll then swap out that old 9-speed derailleur for an 11-speed NX derailleur. We certainly could have gone with a 1x12 for this build, and the only reason we didn't was the deal that I was able to get this customer on the 1x11 components. This was a more affordable way to upgrade to a 1x drivetrain, so it made sense for this build. And it got us some nice NX components, which is a big upgrade for this rig. Turning our attention to the rear wheel set, for this build that bulky Maxxis Aggressor tire needs to go. It's more tire than we need for an XC race bike, especially on the rear. In mountain biking, it's important to have your meatier, grippier, and wider tire in the front. So we'll pull this Aggressor off and we'll swap it out for that lightweight XC Bontrager tire we stole from the front. This in combination with that Rocket Ron will be a great combination for XC racing. And of course, while we're at it, we'll do our part to make America tubeless again. Next, we'll replace the rear cassette, and to do that, we will need our two final specialty tools. I think this is the last time I'll be saying you need a specialty tool, but don't worry. These are tools that you're going to use a lot in bicycle maintenance and are worth investing in. We'll hold the cassette in place with a chain whip for leverage, and then we'll use what's called the cassette lock ring tool to unscrew the lock ring. This might require a fair amount of force. We're going to go ahead and remove what's called the dork disc as well as the plastic reflector, not because I don't believe in safety, but because on a mountain bike, on trails, all the time, on NICA, you're going to be hitting this wheel set so hard that these will eventually break down and they'll end up all over the trail. I see them all over the trail all the time, and it's the responsible thing to do to remove these so they don't end up on the trails. We'll then install our pretty new Sunrace 11-speed cassette by lining up those splines just right and sliding it out as one unit. Trust me, if you can line things up properly and slide this directly from the plastic retainer directly onto the HG free hub, you'll save yourself some pain. It's not as fun to install these cassette rings and spacers one at a time. I like to dab a bit of grease on the threads of the lock ring to avoid the problem I showed you earlier where it's really hard to remove this thing later in the future, and then we tighten things up good and tight with that cassette lock ring tool. We'll then pull out our new 11-speed chainring, but before we install it, we need to get rid of that packing grease that the manufacturer ships these chains in. These chains are shipped with this viscousy, sticky grease that is meant to help preserve the chain, but which is not something you want when you're on the mountain, especially if you live and ride in conditions like we do where it's dusty and deserty. The chain will bring home half the mountain if you leave that grease on. To help remove the grease, I stick the chain in a Ziploc bag and spray in some degreaser and work it around. We'll then just need to add proper grease for the type of riding and weather where you live, though that discussion is beyond the scope of this video. We'll then thread the new chain onto the cassette and through the derailleur pulleys, and then measure the chain for proper fit. As you thread the chain through the derailleur, make sure the chain does not go on the outside of this small bar between the derailleur pulleys. If so, this is going to screw up your otherwise excellent new drivetrain in a hurry. When it comes to the size of your chain, there are lookup tables online where you can insert the year and model of your bike and then type the drivetrain to look up the appropriate number of links that your chain will need and cut to that length. But I just find it simpler, especially on hardtails, to tension the chain on the smallest string until the derailleur pulleys clear themselves without contact, and that's where I cut. In this case, the chain was the exact right size out of box, which I swear is the first time that's ever happened to me. We'll then want to thread the derailleur cable housing. In your Build a Better Bike upgrade kit, you'll get a healthy length of this cable along with ferrules, which you'll want to place at the ends of the housing. Astute observers will note that I put the brake lever on before the shifter. It should be the other way around. However, I corrected this when we cut the handlebars later to fit the kid. We'll zip tie on our housing, and once it's all in place, we'll cut the housing so that the cable routes nice and parallel to our brake cable for a nice tidy cockpit. We'll add our second ferrule and then thread our shifter cable into the housing. At the derailleur, we'll want to make sure we route the shifter cable properly. It should go around the little wheelie deal and then through the little hole on the round, halfway round little tab thing. Look, I tried to look up the proper names of these things on the derailleur, but I can't find them, so I'm doing the best I can here. Feel free to watch a more in-depth video about SRAM derailleurs or complain in the comments if you're dissatisfied with my explanation. We'll then need to adjust our derailleur to get it dialed in, but I'm actually going to refer you to an excellent video from Park Tool on how to do this, as this would be a lengthy addition to this already lengthy video, and I know I'm not going to do a better job than Park Tool already did in teaching how to set up a derailleur, which is a delicate art. I'll then grease back up the threads for the reinstallation of these lovely green pedals, and we're ready for a final weigh-in. And it looks like we saved ourselves almost 6 pounds with these upgrades, which is a decent amount of weight savings, which our little racer is definitely going to benefit from. So while the upgrades you end up doing will probably look different than the ones that I did, and you could spend more or less than I did, this at least gives you an idea of what you can do. For the specific Build a Better Bike upgrade kit that we did here, including the new front wheel set, new front tire, new front fork, a new carbon handlebar, new bottom bracket, new drivetrain, this specific discount came in at, I don't know, I'm gonna have to look, but I'll put the dollar amount on the screen right now. And if you needed all the tools we used today in our Build a Better Bike basic toolkit, that discounted price is on your screen right now as well. So that gets you at least a sense of the cost of upgrading. And although it's certainly not a cheap sport, hopefully that can help you save some money. Also keep in mind that all the upgrades that we did here can be stripped off and applied to a larger frame as your child grows, or if they want to upgrade to a full suspension at some point, or a carbon or something more expensive, you can reuse all of these components. And this is the type of upgrade cycle that you want to do as your kid gets more and more into racing. So whether you end up using this knowledge to upgrade a bike for your little shredder, or you just enjoy watching videos about mountain bikes, I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again real soon.